The laugh wasn't loud. That's what made it impossible to forget. It slipped out of my brother's mouth just as the lawyer finished reading the will. A soft, breathy sound, quickly swallowed by a cough and a polite smile. No one else reacted. Chairs shifted, papers were gathered. My mother reached for her purse. My father stared at the polished surface of the table as if it held answers he didn't want to explain. But I heard it. I was 26 years old, sitting straight, backed in a stiff leather chair that felt too formal for a family moment that suddenly felt very small. My hands were folded tightly in my lap, fingers pressing into each other, trying to anchor me to something solid. I told myself not to react, not yet, not here. The lawyer cleared his throat and continued speaking. Percentages, assets, responsibilities. My brother, Aaron, nodded along, composed and practiced, like this outcome had been rehearsed. He inherited the house. The investments, the title of executor. Words like capable and reliable floated around him like a warm light. And then there was me, nothing, no clause, no explanation, no acknowledgement beyond a brief pause that felt more uncomfortable than intentional. I waited for someone to say my name. I waited for a correction, a "we'll discuss this later," anything that would tell me I hadn't just imagined it. But silence settled in, thick and final. I smiled because that's what I had always done when things didn't make sense. I nodded because questioning felt inappropriate. Somewhere deep inside me, something folded in on itself, not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet closing, like a door being shut gently but firmly. Afterward, in the hallway outside the office, my mother squeezed my arm. "You understand," she said softly. It wasn't a question. My father kissed my forehead and said, "You've always been so strong." That was his way of explaining things he didn't want to justify. Aaron lingered behind, keys in hand, waiting until we were alone. "Hey," he said lightly, like we'd just finished lunch instead of dividing a lifetime into pieces. "Don't overthink it. Dad just thinks I'm better suited for the responsibility." I nodded again. I didn't ask why responsibility looked so much like reward. I didn't ask where I fit into that equation. That night, I lay awake replaying the laugh in my head. It wasn't cruel. That would have been easier to process. It was casual, familiar, as if my absence from the will confirmed something Aaron already believed. A week later, he called me. "I need a small favor," he said, "just to help things move smoothly." That favor became a co-signed loan. Then another. He explained everything patiently, confidently, like a teacher reassuring a student. "It won't affect you," he said. "It's just temporary." When payments were late, I was asked to call the bank. When explanations were needed, my name was the one offered. When tension rose between him and our parents, I was the bridge. "You're so good at keeping the peace," my mother told me once, smiling with relief. I believed her, or maybe I needed to. I told myself families worked this way, that roles formed naturally, that love didn't always look fair on paper, and I carried that belief carefully, like something fragile, even as it began to weigh more than I expected. I didn't know yet that the laugh I heard that day wasn't the beginning of my pain. It was the moment I stopped being surprised by it. Peace, I learned, is not light. It settles into you quietly, like a responsibility no one formally hands over, but everyone expects you to carry. After the will reading, my role in the family became clearer, though no one ever named it. I was the one who answered calls when voices were tight, the one who translated silences into reassurance, the one who said it's fine even when it wasn't. Aaron's requests came dressed as conversations. He never demanded anything outright. He just explained situations carefully, logically, until the solution naturally seemed to be me. Another document, another signature, another favor that would make things easier for everyone. I told myself I was helping, that I was choosing harmony over conflict, but harmony has a cost, and mine was invisible to everyone but me. I began to notice how often my name appeared where my voice didn't. Emails sent on my behalf. Apologies signed with both our names, though I hadn't been consulted. Phone calls that began with, "We spoke to your brother," and ended with expectations placed squarely on my shoulders. When I tried to ask questions, the room shifted. "Why are you being difficult?" And my mother asked once, not unkindly. Aaron is under so much pressure. So was I, but my pressure was quieter, and quiet things are easier to ignore. My father praised my maturity. "You're the steady one," he said, as if steadiness meant infinite capacity. I nodded, absorbing the compliment and the responsibility it carried. It was easier to accept the label than to risk losing my place altogether. I didn't feel anger then. I felt tired of translating other people's comfort into my inconvenience. Tired of being careful with my words, so no one else had to be careful with theirs. Tired of explaining my absence as understanding. The night a payment was missed, Aaron called me late. "It's nothing," he said quickly before I could speak. "Just a timing issue. Can you call them tomorrow? They'll listen to you." Something in his tone assumed my agreement. Not because he was cruel, but because I had taught him to expect it. I stared at my phone long after the call ended. For the first time, I didn't rush to solve the problem. I sat with the discomfort. And in that stillness, a thought surfaced that scared me with its clarity. If I disappear, what remains of my value to them? I didn't voice that thought. I wasn't ready. Instead, I started paying attention. I watched how praise followed compliance, how warmth faded when I hesitated, how silence was used, not as rest, but as correction, and slowly I realized that keeping the peace had never meant mutual care. It meant containment. It meant absorbing impact so others wouldn't feel it. There was grief in that understanding. Real grief, the kind that doesn't cry loudly but settles into your bones. I still helped, still signed, still smoothed things over, but something had shifted inside me. A distance formed, not bitter, not cold, just observant. I began keeping copies of documents, saving emails, writing dates in a notebook I never showed anyone. Not to expose them, not yet, but to remind myself that what I was carrying was real. Peace, I was learning, should not require self-erasure. And for the first time, I wondered what might happen if I stopped disappearing for everyone else's comfort. There is a moment when silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling informative. I didn't notice it right away. It crept in slowly, during pauses between calls, in the space after messages went unanswered for a few hours longer than usual. I began speaking less not as a strategy, but as a natural response. The more I listened, the more patterns revealed themselves. I heard how Aaron's voice changed depending on what he needed, how my parents' warmth rose and fell in rhythm with my usefulness, how concern appeared quickly when I complied and disappeared just as fast when I hesitated. No one asked how I was. Not really. They asked if things were handled, if the situation was resolved, if I had taken care of it. At first, I felt guilty for noticing, as if observation itself were a betrayal, but clarity has a way of steadying you, even when it hurts. One evening, while sorting through paperwork, I realized how long my name had been traveling without me. Loans, letters, agreements, all connected by a quiet assumption. I would manage the weight because I always had. I thought about the will again, not the money, but the message. I had been left out not because I lacked value, but because my value had already been claimed. I was considered reliable without requiring recognition. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me careful. When Aaron called about another delay, I listened without interrupting. I let the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. "You're still there?" he asked. "Yes," I said calmly. "I just need you to—" "I know," I replied. "I'll get back to you." I didn't rush. For the first time, I didn't explain myself. Days passed, then a week. No emergency followed, no disaster unfolded. What appeared instead was irritation, confusion, a subtle shift in tone. I learned something important then. Urgency often survives on immediate compliance. My father asked if everything was okay between Aaron and me. I told him I was busy. My mother reminded me how much everyone relied on me. I said I understood. And I did, better than they knew. In that quiet space, I began to imagine a different life. Not dramatic, not rebellious, just honest. One where my help was a choice, not an expectation. Where silence was rest, not obligation. The retirement party announcement came in the spring. My father sounded proud, hopeful. He said it would be a celebration of family, of legacy. Aaron was put in charge of arrangements. Of course he was. The night before the party, he called me, voice careful again. "Can you cover one last thing?" he asked. Just until after tomorrow, I felt no rush of anger, no urge to defend, just a calm recognition. Tomorrow mattered. Not because of confrontation, but because I finally knew where I stood. "I'll think about it," I said. After the call, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of a life I had quietly supported. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't prepare accusations. I simply decided one thing. I would not carry what wasn't mine anymore. Silence had taught me enough. And for the first time, I trusted myself to act not loudly, not dramatically, but truthfully. The retirement party was beautiful in the way carefully planned events usually are. Soft music, warm lighting, familiar faces arranged in careful harmony. It looked like a celebration of everything my family believed about itself: stability, success, unity. I arrived early, not out of obligation, but clarity. I watched Aaron move through the room, confident and relaxed, accepting praise that rested on structures I had helped hold together. I felt no bitterness, just distance, like observing a place I once lived but no longer belonged to. When it was time for speeches, my father spoke first. He thanked my mother, his colleagues, my brother. He spoke about legacy, about building something solid and passing it on. Applause followed, smiles all around. Then my name was called. I stood slowly, feeling the quiet settle. I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. I've learned something over the last few years. I began, my voice steady, something simple but important. I paused, not for effect, but to stay honest. Support is meaningful only when it's chosen, not assumed. And peace lasts only when it includes everyone. There was no accusation in my tone. No exposure. Just truth, spoken without urgency. "I love this family," I continued, "but from today forward, my help will come with clarity, consent, and respect." I nodded, thanked my father, and sat down. That was all. No gasps, no confrontation. Just a quiet ripple moving through the room. Confusion, then understanding, then something like recognition. After the party, consequences arrived slowly, the way real ones do. Aaron struggled without my signatures, not dramatically but noticeably. Banks asked questions, timelines tightened. He stopped calling as often. When he did, his tone was different, careful. My parents were distant for a while, not angry, just unsure. They had never imagined the peacekeeper stepping out of the role. They didn't apologize. I didn't need them to. I handled what was legally mine, paid what I owed, removed my name where I could. Where I couldn't, I set limits. And then something unexpected happened. Life became quieter, not lonely, lighter. I slept through the night. I answered calls without tension. I made decisions without rehearsing how to explain them. I learned that calm is not something you earn through sacrifice. It's something you protect through boundaries. Months later, my father asked me to lunch. He didn't mention the will. He didn't explain the past. He just listened more than he spoke. It wasn't resolution, but it was movement. I didn't reclaim anything tangible, no inheritance, no recognition ceremony, no dramatic justice. What I gained was better. I gained the ability to say yes without resentment and no without guilt. I gained peace that didn't require me to disappear. I gained myself back. Some roles are assigned quietly. Leaving them is a quiet act too, and that is enough. Life lesson: respect grows where boundaries are honored. Strength doesn't shout, it stands.